My name is Stella, and I will be presenting on the history of a well-known folk song called This Land Is Your Land. I'll begin by playing the first few verses of the standard version of this song. This recording was released by Smithsonian Folkways Records in 1944.
This land is your land, and this land is my land, from the California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. As I went a-walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway, saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me. I roamed and rambled, and I followed my footsteps to the sparkling sands of her diamond deserts. All around me a voice was sounding, this land was made for you and me.
This version of This Land Is Your Land is learned and sung throughout American elementary schools. And for many, it is viewed as an alternative national anthem. In my presentation, I will discuss the lesser-known attributes of this song. Who composed it? What is its history? Why is it significant? And what does it represent? To the first question, who composed This Land Is Your Land? The answer is Woodrow Wilson Woody Guthrie. He was born on July 14, 1912, in Okemah, Oklahoma, to a relatively well-off family. Yet, by the end of the 1920s, his family was facing the effects of the Depression and the Dust Bowl, which lasted from 1929 until the late 1930s. According to Jeff Place, the curator of the Woody Guthrie Collection at the Smithsonian Institution, Guthrie himself said that his father, quote, lost a farm a day for 30 days during that period of time. In 1929, Guthrie's mother died from Huntington's disease in what was called an insane asylum. Woody Guthrie would also suffer from Huntington's disease toward the end of his life. In order to console himself after his mother's death, Guthrie began to teach himself to play the guitar, mostly through copying records by the Carter family, a musical family trio from North Carolina. And in 1931, Guthrie moved to Texas, where he got married and started his own family. In the spring of 1937, with a second child on the way, he began hitchhiking to California in hopes of providing a better life for himself and his family. In California, he met and became friendly with Will Geer, known for his role in the television show The Waltons. Shortly thereafter, Geer headed to New York City, and Guthrie decided to follow in search of job prospects. It was there in New York City, in, quote, a run-down transient hotel, Hanover House, where in February, Guthrie wrote a number of songs, including the first draft of This Land Is Your Land, and that's from Modern World Blues by William Kaufman. Growing up, Guthrie was very influenced by the records of the Carter family. Additionally, he was not much of a melodist and far preferred to borrow melodies to supply to his own original lyrics. William Kaufman, a scholar and author on Guthrie's life and music, believes that he actually only composed one original tune called Woody's Rag for mandolin. Furthermore, the folk tradition of which Guthrie was a part encouraged the borrowing and sharing of musical melodies. Thus, it is no surprise that the melody of both the chorus and the verses of This Land Is Your Land sound virtually identical to two different songs released by the Carter family in the late 1920s. So, here's a comparison between This Land Is Your Land and the instrumental introduction to Little Darling Pal of Mine by the Carter family. And I'll begin by playing This Land Is Your Land.
As I went a-walking that ribbon of highway, and I saw above me that endless skyway, I saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me.
And here's the Carter family doing Little Darling Pal of Mine. And next is an even more striking comparison between the instrumental chorus of This Land and the Carter family's instrumental introduction to When the World's on Fire. So here's a short excerpt from This Land Is Your Land one more time. And here's the Carter family. Guthrie's adaptation and interpretation of these melodies, making them his own, is emblematic not only of the folk tradition, but also of the lyrics he would write. So that brings me to my next point. Why are the lyrics significant? Side by side are the lyrics to two different versions of This Land Is Your Land. The standard version by Guthrie, which is sung, accepted, and remembered by most individuals in the U.S., and the original version Guthrie wrote and recorded, but was never released during his lifetime. The difference between these versions is the omission of a significant and more radical verse, which appears right in the middle of the original version of this song. Meanwhile, the standard version simply repeats the third verse, which appears in both versions at the end of the song. In addition to the lyrics he wrote to the original version, Guthrie also composed another variant, which includes two more radical verses. This is explained and documented by Nora Guthrie, who was Woody Guthrie's daughter, and music historian Robert Santelli. These verses illustrate Guthrie's critical perspective on the government's handling of the Great Depression, and can also be interpreted as his cry for equality, just as the civil rights movement was in its early stages of development. As significant as these verses may be, when Guthrie recorded the original, more radical version in 1944, it was never released. It was not a matter of censorship. Rather, this recording was just among the ones that never made it into circulation. But in 1946, Guthrie recorded the song again, today's standard version, which omitted all of the potentially controversial lyrics for a children's album. Although these recordings existed, the song was mainly shared and passed down through the oral tradition. It was not until the late 1950s, though, that this song would become widely known, when Guthrie's publisher inserted the revised, now standard version into school songbooks. and I will let Kaufman himself continue to explain how this happened.
The early 60s, when Woody's publisher Howie Richmond came up with a really sort of a smart move. He would put the song into the school songbooks. So what happened was kids started singing the song in school, and then they brought it home and their parents heard it and said, wow, that's really catchy, and they started singing it. And so that's how it proliferated, really, from the schools to the parents and then out into the wider world, where then it was picked up by other people singing it. And no one had ever heard the more radical lyrics.
Yet by the mid-1950s, as this song was beginning to circulate, and just as American school children were beginning to learn his song, Guthrie was beginning to suffer from Huntington's disease. He wouldn't give up, though, and according to Kaufman, he called himself Woody Adversity Guthrie, claiming that he ain't dead yet. In that same spirit, he urged his friend Pete Seeger and his son Arlo Guthrie to continue to spread the original lyrics to the song. For many underrepresented individuals in America, this song, in its original form, sends a powerful and empowering message. Many musical groups have even made this song their own, such as Sharon Jones and the Dap Kings and their 2005 cover of This Land Is Your Land. And here's a clip from that.
Was made for you and me. Yeah. Come on, One bright sunny morning, wow, in the shadow of the steeple, it was down by the welfare office, yeah. I saw all kinds of people, yeah. Some of them stood there, they was hungry, homeless. I scratched my head, looking, and I was wondering over and over and over again. I said, if this land was made for you and me, yeah.
Importantly, this cover of the song, using more radical and empowering lyrics, was shared with millions of moviegoers when it was included in the opening credits of the 2009 film Up in the Air, starring George Clooney. Another powerful example is Johnnie Walker, the Scotch whiskey company, which also used a cover of this song in an advertisement to represent their product on the eve of the 2016 presidential election. In the advertisement, performed by Chicano Batman, the lyrics are translated into Spanish to represent inclusivity, inspired by the song they are singing. In July of 2019, in response to Donald Trump and his supporters' chants to send Congresswoman Ilhan Omar back to Somalia, where she fled as a refugee as a child, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez retweeted Guthrie's lyrics in support of Omar. Guthrie's lyrics, even in their most simple, standard form, continued to inspire and encourage people from across America from a variety of different backgrounds. This Land is Your Land and the message it sends does have some detractors. Molly, a young woman whose family is native to America, published an article in June of 2019 entitled "This Land is Whose Land?", sharing her own personal reaction to this song. In her article, she critiques the lack of awareness this song demonstrates towards indigenous peoples. It was not, quote, your land to take in the first place. However, Molly stopped short of criticizing Guthrie himself, recognizing that this song has been a galvanizing force, inspiring peace lovers and change seekers across the country at times of political unrest. According to both Jeff Place and Will Kaufman, Pete Seeger continued to sing "This Land is Your Land" even after Guthrie's death in 1967, and he found himself struggling with the same challenges Molly posed in her article. Both Place and Kaufman share the same anecdote. Quote, "One year at the Newport Folk Festival, a Native American chief approached Pete Seeger and said, 'This country's not made for you, it's my country, made for me.' Pete was completely taken aback by this. On the spot, they came up with a new verse together. 'This land was stole by you from me.' Once revised, they all sang 'This Land is Your Land' together." In our interview, Molly suggests that "This Land is Your Land" should be replaced by a more appropriate song. Interestingly, in her own band, she begins a song with the lyrics, "Is this land yours? Is this land mine?" To me, the beauty in "This Land is Your Land" is that it has been, and it continues to be passed down for generations. It is interpreted, adapted, and accessed by musicians of all different backgrounds and genres. It is like America, and like much of roots music, in that it grows and changes as we do. And on that note, and in conclusion, here is Pete Seeger performing "This Land is Your Land" on his 90th birthday with his grandson, Tao Rodriguez Seeger, and Bruce Springsteen at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C.
Everybody. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island. From the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream water. This land was made for you and me.
In the squares of the city, by the shadow of the steeple, by the relief office, I saw my people as they stood there hungry. I stood whistling.
This land was made for you and me.
A great high wall tried to stop me. Great big sign there. Private property. On the other side, it didn't say nothing. That side was made for you and me. Nobody living can ever stop me. As I go walking on Freedom Highway, nobody living can make me turn back.
Thank you very much for watching. This is my bibliography. I hope you enjoyed.